What happens when the most successful driver in history fails to tame F1's most iconic single-seater? Is Hamilton at the beginning of the end, or preparing a historic comeback? Stay tuned because this goes far deeper than you imagine. The story of Lewis Hamilton's signing for Ferrari didn't simply begin with a press announcement. It was an earthquake that shook the foundations of Formula One, an event that divided opinions, shook social media, and generated expectations bordering on the epic. Because we're not talking about just any driver, we're talking about the most successful driver of all time. 7 world championships, countless records, and a career forged by 2 dynasties. The explosive freshness of McLaren in its golden years and the hegemony meticulously built with Mercedes for more than a decade. This move wasn't driven by economic reasons or last-minute whims. It was a profoundly strategic decision for both Hamilton and Ferrari. At Maranello, John Elkann, group president, saw Lewis as more than just a driver. He saw him as the symbol of the return to the lost throne. A figure capable of bringing not only results but also respect, credibility, and a narrative of redemption that Ferrari has been unsuccessfully pursuing for years. The meetings took place in secret, away from the media radar, until finally, in February 2024, it was made official. Hamilton would wear red in 2025. The news reshaped the political landscape in the paddock. Toto Wolff, with whom Hamilton maintained an almost paternal relationship, was visibly affected. Within Mercedes, the reaction was one of surprise, but also respect. They knew Lewis was looking for more than just another contract. He was looking for one last great battle, a closing ceremony worthy of his legacy. Meanwhile, at Ferrari, the euphoria was palpable. The offices in Maranello were filled with red merchandise bearing the number 44 before the first race. The Scuderia had a leader again, a name as powerful as that of the prancing horse. Hamilton's arrival was seen as the beginning of a new era. The media hailed it as the ultimate alliance, the best driver of the 21st century with the most iconic team in the history of the sport. A film script with all the ingredients for legend. But as with any good narrative, conflict soon emerged. From the first preseason tests, a subtle but clear disconnect was evident. The SF-25, although fast in simulations, didn't perform as Lewis expected. The first races confirmed that this wasn't a simple adaptation process, but a structural difference between the car and the Britain's driving style. Unlike Leclerc, who seemed born to squeeze every inch out of the new chassis, Hamilton was forced to reinvent himself. And that, for a champion who dominated with pinpoint precision at Mercedes, is a head-on collision with his own history. The discomfort began to become evident not only on the track, but also in the comments. Phrases like, "We're learning together," "I'm still not comfortable," "There's potential but there's a lack of confidence" became part of the usual discourse. Each session was followed by a dose of barely contained frustration, a glance toward the pit box looking for answers, and a qualifying session that rarely placed him ahead of his teammate. What was supposed to be a triumphant start turned into a seemingly endless mountain. And yet, it is precisely in this tension that many see the true beginning of a more human, more complex, more interesting story. Because if Hamilton manages to reverse this narrative, if he turns discomfort into performance, the Red Dream could be rewritten as one of the greatest epics of modern F1. One of the cruelest and most complex aspects of elite motorsport is that talent alone is not enough. The car is an extension of the driver, and when that connection fails, what we see on the track is a silent struggle that destroys confidence lap after lap. That's the real drama Lewis Hamilton is experiencing at Ferrari today. The SF-25 isn't a bad car. In fact, on paper, it's one of the most advanced and balanced cars on the 2025 grid. The engineers at Maranello worked all winter on a concept that sought to optimize mid- and high-speed cornering, reduce rear tire degradation, and increase lateral rigidity without compromising traction. But each of these technical decisions had consequences, and one of the most troubling has clearly manifested itself in Hamilton's hands. The problem stems from the front axle. The SF-25 has a setup that requires a very precise tire warm-up process. While Leclerc has demonstrated an instinctive ability to generate temperature quickly and aggressively in the first corners, Hamilton has constantly struggled to reach that optimal operating window. The result is immediate understeer on corner entry, forcing him to take more conservative lines and, consequently, losing critical tenths of a second. This isn't simply a matter of failing to adapt. It's a multi-layered technical phenomenon. The SF-25's weight distribution is more skewed toward the rear, seeking to maximize traction on corner exit. But this penalizes the front axle when the asphalt is cold or when the driver doesn't apply enough vertical load in the opening meters. Hamilton, accustomed to cars that reacted more predictably and allowed for quicker adjustments from the steering wheel, now finds himself struggling with a chassis that demands surgical aggression from the first braking. Telemetry confirms this tension. At circuits like Saudi Arabia and Melbourne, Hamilton loses time primarily in low-speed corners, especially in the initial combinations where a large part of the lap's performance is determined. This translates into a generalized pace problem, but also into enormous emotional frustration. Because it's not just a matter of not being fast, but of not understanding exactly why the car isn't responding. The team has tried to alleviate the situation with different suspension setups, balance adjustments, and engine map changes, but each modification brings new side effects. In modern F1, where setup windows are so narrow, changing one thing can unbalance another. And this is exacerbated when the driver is still developing confidence with the car, as is Lewis's case. Furthermore, the SF-25's power steering system, firmer and less progressive than that of the Mercedes W15, represents another obstacle. Hamilton has mentioned on several occasions that he needs to better sense the feedback from the front axle in order to anticipate the limits of grip. Without that sensitivity, his driving style, which has always been based on fine-tuned slip control, is neutralized. The final straw came in qualifying for the Chinese Grand Prix, where despite achieving a solid lap, the data showed he was still 3/10 off the potential time Leclerc could have set before aborting his second attempt. And although he managed to advance in the race, every maneuver was a battle against the car rather than against his rivals. All of this highlights a critical point. It's not enough to have a competitive car if that car doesn't respond to the driver's DNA. In this case, Ferrari has built an effective car, but with a character that seems tailor-made for Charles Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, is forced to adapt, to modify decades of instinct to fit into a machine that, until now, hasn't suited him. Every great Formula One story has its turning point, and although the recent chapters in the relationship between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari have been fraught with uncertainty, the outcome has yet to be written. Because if the seven-time world champion has proven anything throughout his career, it's that he doesn't give up in the face of adversity. And in this case, the tunnel may be full of twists and turns, but at the end of it, a technical and strategic glimmer already looms that could change the narrative. Ferrari is working on a progressive restructuring plan for the SF-25, designed to better adapt to both Hamilton's driving style and the season's new technical challenges. Starting with the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, the team will introduce a series of significant updates. The first package will focus on a revised floor, seeking to improve airflow to the diffuser and increase rear-end stability in low-speed corners. This change is specifically aimed at alleviating the problem of front-end understeer, one of Lewis's biggest complaints so far. In addition, a new rear suspension specification is being developed. The idea is to increase the car's operating range in variable track conditions, something that has affected Hamilton more than Leclerc, particularly in sessions with sudden changes in track temperature. There is also talk of modifying the brake-by-wire mapping and the ERS energy management system, in order to give Hamilton a more linear response in the braking and acceleration zones, where he has traditionally made the difference. For his part, Hamilton hasn't been sitting back. In recent weeks, he's intensified his work in the simulator at Maranello, actively participating in the development of the new setup. He's even proposed changes to the communication interface with his track engineer, seeking to replicate some of the technical language he used at Mercedes. Adaptation isn't just mechanical, it's also cultural. And Lewis knows he must build a foundation of trust from within if he wants the team to respond to his needs in critical moments. Beyond technical development, there's a strategic component that's also evolving. Ferrari plans to redesign its decision-making system during the race. A rapid real-time analysis cell has been formed, with engineers dedicated exclusively to evaluating alternative scenarios during the weekends. This measure aims to avoid mistakes like the one in Australia, where a misreading of the weather conditions cost important points. Hamilton has insisted that these types of tools can make the difference between a victory and a forgettable result. As for the internal environment, although tensions haven't disappeared, there are signs of rebuilding. Vasseur has publicly reinforced his commitment to Hamilton, assuring that the entire team is aligned to make this alliance work. Joint sessions have even been held with Leclerc and Hamilton to align technical criteria, something that hasn't happened since pre-season. But the big question remains, will it be enough? Because Formula One is unforgiving. Every race is an opportunity lost or won, and while McLaren and Red Bull continue to evolve steadily, Ferrari can't afford any more setbacks. Hope is on the horizon, yes, but perfect execution and immediate results are needed for that hope to transform into a real comeback. Hamilton is clear that this could be his last great adventure in F1. He didn't come to Ferrari for comfort or nostalgia. He came to win. And if he manages to turn this story around, he will not only be cementing his legacy as the most successful driver of all time, but he will also be closing the most challenging cycle of his career with a victory that transcends the sporting aspect. A victory that would be human, emotional, and legendary. In the world of Formula One, where engineering borders on perfection and decisions are made at the limits of logic and intuition, there is something that can never be fully calculated: the soul of a story. And what Lewis Hamilton is experiencing at Ferrari is, without a doubt, a story with soul. One that speaks of courage, change, internal and external struggle. One that transcends statistics to touch the very heart of the sport. When Hamilton announced his signing for Ferrari, the world saw a masterstroke, an inevitable union of myth and legacy. But what was not immediately apparent, at least not immediately, was the monumental risk involved for both parties. Ferrari didn't sign just any driver. They signed a living legend, a force of nature who has shaped the recent history of the sport. But even legends, when placed in a different environment, must once again prove why they are so. And that is exactly what is happening today. Hamilton, who could have comfortably retired at Mercedes with full honors, decided to complicate his life. He decided to expose himself to the unknown, to test himself once again. That choice alone is a declaration of principles. Because what's easy doesn't leave a mark. What's comfortable doesn't build epics. Instead, facing adversity, redesigning his own driving style, questioning himself, listening, adapting. That's what makes a driver something more. On Ferrari's side, there's also a great lesson in progress. The Scuderia, historically accustomed to leading with internal strength, must now learn to coexist with an external figure with his own voice, with ideas forged in other technical empires. Integrating Hamilton isn't just about adapting the car to his needs. It's about accepting a new way of seeing and thinking about Formula One. And that process, although uncomfortable, may be exactly what the team needs to break the inertia that has kept it out of the championship for more than a decade. What we have at hand is not just another season. It's a story in the making with the outcome yet to be written. It could end in disappointment, of course, but it could also become one of the most inspiring comebacks this sport has ever seen. Because if Hamilton manages to not only compete but win with Ferrari, he will be bringing his career to a close in the most audacious and romantic way possible. Winning with the toughest team on the most demanding stage and against all odds. And maybe, just maybe, that's the true purpose of this adventure. Not to add another title, but to show that even the greatest champions can reinvent themselves when everything seems against them. That greatness isn't measured solely by victories, but by the path taken to achieve them. And that the red Ferrari, when pushed to its limits by someone unafraid of failure, can shine brightly once again.